welcome back to the Sewcial Hour Podcast, a podcast for sewists by sewists. I'm your host, Bethany.
And I'm your host, Audra. And today we are talking about some of the fabrics that are fundamental for bag making, which, as you all know, is very near and dear to my heart, being that I work for Sally Tomato and we do all things bags all the time.
And I would say I'm pretty new. I feel like I've done the normal progression of entry-level bags, entry-level materials for bag making, which we'll talk about today, and then worked my way up and doing some pretty amazing bags, I have to say. I'm pretty impressed with some of the things I've been able to make. But let's jump right into our icebreaker this week. In our icebreaker, we would love for you all to go over to our Facebook group, The Sewcial Sewists, and answer the icebreaker question. So the question this week is, what is your go-to bag style? What do you feel like you make the most when you do make a bag? What about you, Audra?
All of them.
All of them?
We're just gonna answer that with all of them. And this is what happens when you open up the bag making world into your sewing, your daily sewing habit, is that the options are endless. My handmade bag collection is fairly extensive, and I change the bag I use at least multiple times a week, depending on the outfit. It really just depends. Am I running errands? Am I going out to dinner? Am I doing the kid thing and I need a bigger tote? Very quickly to say, all of them.
I would say, because I'm still dabbling into the different bag styles and stuff and figuring out what I like, but hands down, I love a crossbody. I like to be as hands-free as possible because I'm usually carrying stuff around, and if I have a bag in my hand to keep up with too, I'm probably going to lose it. Anytime I can be hands-free is ideal for me. So I actually made that Ferris crossbody from Sally Tomato right before my Sydney, Australia trip, and that's the only bag I took with me. One, because it lays nice and flat. When I was at the airport, you have to tuck that into your backpack last minute because you can only have 2 carry-ons. It was able to fit in my bag. It was easy for me to be able to travel with. It kept my important belongings right to my chest. I didn't have to worry. I could film and take pictures and do all this stuff, and it just was perfect. So I would say that's been my most used bag that I've ever made. And I've made a lot of different types so far, but that's the one that I tend to reach for the most right now. And I feel like since I made it for my Australia trip, it's the only one I've really used for the most part.
It is funny switching back. So my daily sling bag is the Fifth Avenue pattern, and I wear that sling bag. That's my go-to bag, just as my default. And it's funny when I switch back to a handbag or a purse, and I'm like, oh wait, I have to carry this around. It's kind of a mental shift going from hands-free to actually have to dedicating a hand to it. Or when you're grocery shopping, actually having to put your bag in the cart.
Which always makes me nervous. I'm always if Brock's with me growing up, I would always be like, don't leave the cart. Sure enough, 2 seconds later, that boy would walk away from my cart. I'm like, what part of my purse? So I just was like, I need to just carry it with me, but I'm going to go pick something off the shelf or pick some fruit off the counter. Thankfully, nothing ever happened. That's one of those things. It's once you go crossbody, it's man, you
never go back.
Now, I have a bonus question and for Audra, and she didn't know I was going to ask this, but it just popped in my head, and you guys can answer this too in the Sewcial Sewists Facebook group or in the comments of our video. Do you find that different seasons you reach for different types of bags? And let me elaborate. I have made several backpack bags, and I love backpack bags. I don't love them in the winter when I also have to wear a coat, because then it's so much bulk, and it's how do I get it on my back? And it's maybe I've got a hood, and it just becomes more difficult to put on. And I feel like the only way to carry a backpack bag is to actually wear it like a backpack. And I also don't love that every time I need to get in and out of it, I have to take it on and off. In the spring and summer and early fall, when I don't have to layer so much, I tend to love my backpack bags. So that's just one example of how I feel. And I don't know if that's just me and I'm weird. And maybe I am, and that's probably not a shocker to anybody listening. I just am curious, do you find that you reach for different bags at different seasons? And if so, why?
For me, it's not so much the bag as much as the fabrics of the bag. It's funny enough, I vacillate with that all winter long, because I still will wear my Fifth Avenue all winter with my down jacket.
Do you find that you reach for the crossbody is not as challenging because you can put that on and then put your coat on?
No, I put the crossbody on over my coat. Here in Wisco, we're used to layering, and I think we just like it annoys me because it always gets stuck in my hood, but I still do it. I think it's more for me. I'll still persevere if I love the pattern. It's just I pick different fabrics, so I might pick more wintry fabrics, more summery fabrics. So me, it's more of a fabric shift than so much of a pattern shift. Because when you deal with negative 35 temps, you just learn to persevere when you love that bag.
Let's move into our topic. We wanted to talk about why fabric choice matters when it comes to bag making. Audra, I'll let you kick it off.
I think the first thing we wanted to touch on was on a couple of terms, especially for newer bag makers. There are terms in bag making that you may not encounter in quilting or in garment sewing. And the big two, in my opinion, are the terms woven and non-woven. And when you're making garments, when you're quilting, you're primarily working with woven fabrics, but they might not be called woven fabrics. You might be sewing with rayon or flannel or cottons, but it's not necessarily called a woven fabric. When we get into bag making, we have wovens and non-wovens. In the woven category is all those materials that you're used to in garment sewing and quilting. And then, so that, like I said, would be your rayons, your flannels, your cottons.
I would even go as far to say, like, when I think of non-wovens, I assume knit and stretchy. My assumption as a garment sewer assumes that it's a stretch. It has stretch to it, or it falls into the knit category. So that, to me, like when you say woven and non-woven, that's where my head goes. I'm still learning a lot about bag making, but when you were talking about those two terms, and I was like, so stretch and no stretch? Like, that's kind of where my head goes.
The non-woven in the bag making world would be a cork, a faux leather, a vinyl, something that typically can be cut and left raw edge. That's really the best way to go. Is it woven or non-woven? If it's woven, it can't be left raw edge. If it's non-woven, it can be. So if you're making a bag and it's cork and you can cut it and sew and leave that raw edge exposed, that would be considered a non-woven.
For my garment sews out there, let me make a little mental connection that just happened with me when she explained this. When I think of non-wovens and my head goes to knits and stretch, you don't have to finish the edge of a knit because it won't fray like a woven. Even though we're not dealing with stretch, we're dealing with other types of materials. That seems to be the common denominator, that you don't have to finish the edge, whether it's a non-woven in bag making or like a knit in garment sewing. So it's also non-woven. I feel like that's the common denominator. I was just showing someone yesterday my pajamas, sent them a video of the pajamas that I make with rib knit, and I don't finish the edges of the shirt, like the tank top or the shorts. I do a little lettuce hem, like a raw edge, and something fun and different to do because you don't have to hide that edge. You don't have to worry about fray. That was just a light bulb moment. We're like step one into this conversation. I feel like I'm going to keep learning so much more, and I hope you guys are too.
That's a perfect connotation. The funny thing is, I've been a garment sewer. I'm not as advanced as you, but I've been a garment sewer for a long time, and I never made that connection. So I think this is one of those things where it all depends on how something is explained and how we use it in sewing. It might be something that you actually know, but you don't actually realize you know it because it hasn't been explained in a way that made sense.
And I just had a light bulb moment. This is the fun part of doing this and this is the moments in the podcast that I love the most, is like we're learning from each other right along with everybody else tuning in. One of the other things that's important to talk about is the structure of your fabric, the durability, what the intended use is. Is this something that is just for that little black dress date night, or is this something that's going to get a lot of daily use? Whatever your purpose is, picking the right fabric makes a huge difference in how long it's going to last. Wear and tear, choosing quality materials really does matter, which we'll talk about a little more in a minute. If there is a material that you really want to use, how do I stabilize it to be able to have the structure I need? I think when you first get into bag making, as a garment sewist and as a craft sewist and as even a quilter, I feel like I can kind of look at these patterns and go, oh, I can swap this for that. Once you build up some knowledge and skills of different types of things, you're like, oh, I can achieve this look or get this structure, or maybe I want more stability and structure or to the shape of the bag or whatever. Do I really need to use these specific things that are listed in the pattern? When it comes to bag making, and especially if you're new to it, I would say follow the pattern at least the first time you go through it. And I would also say another tip that I've learned is I don't normally read through a pattern before I sew it. I just dive right in. I look at the supply list. Do I have what I need? And I just start cutting and going. When it comes to bag making, I would not recommend. That's been a learning curve for me. If you can relate to me on that, I would just say there's so many pieces. Then garment sewing. And so if you screw up and you only have so much of the material, you're kind of stuck. Just know that it's important to read through the instructions. There's a lot of variables with bag making. All these little things, I feel like there's more information that you learn reading through the pattern than you get at the beginning of it.
It's my nightly reading. I always read through patterns for whatever I'm making before I start. I'll get into bed and I read through my pattern. I mentally walk through the steps of what I'm going to do. So then when I actually get into making it, it's almost like I've already made it because I've mentally made it when walking through the pattern. And really talking about why fabric choices are important. We talked about this in one of the first episodes that I jokingly call myself a sewing masochist because if I can push the limits, I probably will. But don't do what I do. Please learn from my mistakes. If the pattern is written saying it calls for cotton or it calls for canvas or calls for full leather, chances are there's a reason. And especially as a newer bag maker, follow what the pattern writer has said. And even going back to our earlier conversation about fraying or not fraying or exposed edges, not exposed edges, if it says the entire thing should be made out of faux leather, you might want to look because there might be an exposed edge somewhere. So replacing it with quilting cottons is not a great idea. Or it might not hold up like it's supposed to. It might not have the structure it's supposed to. Or if you go to a heavier fabric, your machine might not be able to handle those thicker areas. So if the pattern writer says to use a certain type of fabric, please listen. And if you aren't sure and you don't really fully understand, ask the pattern writer. Say, hey, I've never made a bag before, or I've never made this type of bag before. Could you please give me a little guidance? Or better yet, if they've got a tutorial out there you can watch the tutorial because they might actually answer your question before you email them the question.
I'd say a lot of pattern designers, they typically will put some sort of beginner, intermediate, or advanced skill level. Now that is objective to the designer of the pattern. I would say, like, especially if you're a beginner, look for those beginner projects first. Otherwise, you're going to get discouraged, or you're going to invest and cut, and then your machine's not going to be able to handle sewing it. Just know, like, that's something to keep in mind and do your research. I feel like there's a lot more research and prep that goes into bag making than even quilting. That's one of the biggest things that kind of slows me down with my growth in bag making, is because it takes a long time just to even cut out all the pieces and the stabilizers and find the right hardware and make it all coordinate. And, like, to me, that's like the hard part of it because I don't have a huge stash. And so that's why I was excited that we were talking about this today, because if you are interested in getting to bag making, or you're just into it like I am, what are some things that I might be interested in, and kind of narrow that down so you can, start building that stash more effectively. So when you are ready to sew and you've got a pattern, you can actually do it.
And there are a lot of not only like pieces to the pattern, but then you also have all the different types of hardware, all the different types of interfacing and stabilizers. And there's not always continuity across pattern writers in how they describe things. Some people might call interfacing heavy stabilizer, and then heavy stabilizer is kind of up to a lot of discretion. Or they might call a swivel hook a lobster hook or something like that. So there's not always continuity in how things are described in the pattern. Sometimes I can solve these with a quick Google search, or maybe in a bag making group on social media, like search and see if someone's made it before.
Phone a friend.
Phone a friend. Exactly. It's a little bit more, but don't be discouraged because the end result is so fun. It's just making sure that you kind of like do your homework before you dive in. Because like Bethany said, you could end up cutting up some fabrics that you really love and it doesn't go to plan.
Do your research. I will say this, if you're a bag designer out there, especially on your beginner bags, please make sure that you're using easily sourceable hardware for those beginner bags. I've purchased a beginner bag, and then the hardware that they used was so specific that I had to like special order it. To me, that doesn't equal beginner if I can't easily just get access to certain things that for a beginner who's new to this, right? If that becomes hard, then it shuts me down. Something as simple as the hardware. And you know what? I got the hardware, but I was so discouraged with the process of getting it that I still haven't made that bag. I find that having just a photo of the hardware in the pattern and listing like next to each like picture of like what each item is, because as someone who's new to that, I don't know what these are all called. I don't know what the sliders are from the squares, from the D-rings. Like, I mean, some of this I know, but a lot of it I was like, I I don't know. And I can't tell the difference between a bag foot and a rivet on your picture sometimes. So like I just feel like if you really want people to be successful with your patterns, not just listing the hardware, but actually having an image, because that visual aid is huge. And this leads me to another impromptu question, because I feel like you and I may differ on this, because you were talking about like how you read through the pattern and you go through, and I was like, well, if I start reading through the steps of a pattern, I'm going to fall asleep if I'm not making it. But what I will do is skim through the pictures. My question is, and this is kind of a curveball, is when you go to a restaurant, do you typically order something that has a photo of what it looks like, or do you pick something that just has a description and no image? I tend to lean towards something that has a photo. I want to know what I'm going to get, and I feel like that just kind of relays to how I deal with patterns. But I'm curious, like, do you tend to like order off of a photo in a menu, or just read through all the descriptions on the menu and pick from there?
I think it depends on what type of cuisine. Say I'm getting like Vietnamese food and I'm not really sure what some of the ingredients are, but it looks really good. Then like I'll order from the picture. But if it's something I'm super familiar with, like if you're going out for like barbecue or for me, like Italian food, I'll just go off the description. So it just depends.
I'm just such a visual person. Yeah. And I just think that translates in so many other areas of our lives about how we learn and how we receive information. And so as you were saying, like, oh, I'll read through it like a little book before I go to bed. And I'm like, that's one way to put me to sleep.
What's interesting is I am incredibly visual. So what I find myself doing is when I'm reading through the pattern, I'm actually I usually look at the photos of each step. And if I don't understand the photos, then I'll read what I'm supposed to do. And then I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
And then you visually or mentally walk through it. Yeah.
And then I'll mentally walk through it. The irony of how I learn is I help create video tutorials all the time. I help write scripts. I help develop content. I rarely ever watch a video tutorial, like ever. No. And I don't know why. It's so funny. Only if I get stuck. Only if I get like super stuck, and I'm like, okay, I need to go see this step. But for the most part, for someone who like helps develop video content all the time and develops video content, I never watch it.
I don't really either unless I get stuck. I don't even read the instructions very much. I just look at the pictures, and I'll skim the instructions if I am confused by the pictures. For the most part, I just kind of jump right in. I'd say I'm a little more thorough with my bag making than I am like garments and other projects, but for the most part, I just kind of dive right in. And that's not saying that that's what you guys should do. It's just after 30 plus years of sewing, that's just kind of where I'm at, because I don't have the patience to sit there and read all the instructions.
And this one, after 30 years of sewing, still loves to read directions, but that is why she is like the yin to my yang, because like we'll kind of wrap up how fabrics are important. We have a couple more things. I think Bethany, you were going to kind of talk a little bit about interfacing and stabilizers and how important those are.
There's a lot of different types out there. I think some can be interchangeable. I think some can be buildable to use what you have available. I will say it's good to have a little stock of a common selection. So like fusible foams or Pellon, different weights of Pellons and things like that. Fusible, non-fusible. I think if you're really serious about getting into bag making, you'll find that you'll reach for those different things on a more regular basis. Whereas like my stabilizers and interfacing for garment making is much lighter, and it's very subtle, and it's a totally different type of material for a different purpose. I think there's, for the most part, I would say a lot of people communicate what they use, and they'll say a specific brand. And then if you go search that brand, you usually kind of find other alternatives that or other terms for that same type. So if you don't have that brand readily available, but you have another version of that, or you can order something else online. But there's a lot of different ones out there, and don't be afraid to like try different things. I would always say like especially if it's a fusible, take your material, like a scrap piece of your material after you've cut your stuff out, or even before you do, just a small little scrap of the material and the small little piece of the stabilizer that it's calling for or the what you have available. Fuse them together and kind of get a feel for like, are these stable together? Is this really going to hold this backpack into its shape? Or, the bigger the bag, I feel like the more you have to really consider stabilizer or the purpose of the bag, right? And so I think there's a lot of different variations here, but at the end of the day, you don't want something that's going to end up floppy, weak, or not be structurally sound or hold up with integrity over use. Unless floppy is the look you're going for. There are floppy bags, but I'm just saying, like, overall, when we get into some of these heavier materials, we want to make sure we're stabilizing correctly. I made the Saya Sidekick backpack by Lynn's Handmade. We put foam on the back of this heavy luxe vinyl. Like, it's thick vinyl. This vinyl does not need any stabilizer. We put foam on the back and quilted it. And that gave it the cushion to have that plush quilted look. But we didn't put it all the way to the edges, so it didn't make it more challenging to sew up in the seams. There are ways to incorporate stabilizers to get a different look or do custom stitching, or if you're going to do embroidery on your material before you sew it up. Like, there are other times and places that stabilizer can be incorporated that have nothing to do with structural integrity. It's more for aesthetics.
We can definitely use stabilizers in all kinds of different ways. Yeah. And something I personally do in my bag making is I will only use fusible interfacings if it's in the lining. Mm-hmm. And the reason is I prefer sew-in foam on the exterior. And my reasoning for that is if at any point that fusible kind of starts to lift or detach from the exterior fabric, you can end up with kind of a pucker, or even when you're birthing the bag. Mm-hmm. For those of you who don't know what birthing the bag is, it's when you bring it right side out at the very end, usually through an interior pocket. When we birth the bag, we're kind of putting some stress on those fabrics. And so sometimes that fusible foam or fusible fleece might detach a little bit, or fusible interfacing might detach a little bit from the exterior fabric. So I personally prefer to use sew-in stabilizers and interfacing on the exterior parts of my bag. And then if it's on the inside, I will use fusibles, but I just don't want that puckering look over wear and tear or even during the making process. The final point I wanted to talk about is just being aware of directional fabrics. We are aware of this in other types of sewing, but especially in bag making, you might even have a piece that's like 14 inches by 15 inches. And so be hyper aware of what's the height and what's the width, because if you cut your favorite fabric and you happen to cut it the wrong direction, then you've just burned up some really great fabric that you love. So just be hyper aware of directional fabrics, because sometimes it's not as obvious as it is in other areas.
If you are interested in a directional fabric and wanting to purchase it, get more than you probably normally would, because pattern pieces have to be cut, to Audra's point, with the direction of the pattern. So your layout to maximize your use of that fabric is going to be less, and you're going to need more of it to be able to make a pattern or a project, because it is directional. So you're not going to be able to like finish, and get all those pieces close together. Keep that in mind. Every time I reach for a directional fabric, I'm like, oh, if I normally buy X number amount or yards or rolls, I will usually add at least half or double it, because I just want to make sure that I'm going to have enough for whatever project, because a lot of times I'm buying material before I even have a project in mind. Let's jump into some of the specialty fabrics that you find most commonly in bag making, and then we'll kind of do a little bonus mention of some other ones that we've sewn with as well. But I'll let Audra kick off with cork fabric.
Sure, we'll talk about cork. Cork is a really, really great bag making material. It is vegan, it is hypoallergenic. Usually when cork is farmed, they shave it off of the tree, but they don't take the whole tree. The tree will continue to regenerate. So it's very sustainable in how it is used. So that's really earth friendly. And so that makes you feel good across the board. You check all the boxes of like clean and good for the earth and super durable in bag making. Usually when we look for a cork fabric, there's different kinds of cork. You'll have very, very thin cork, which is usually just the cork cork itself. But then the best type of cork to really sew with would be a cork that's backed with fabric, because then it really acts like fabric when you're using it. It doesn't have as stiff of a structure when you're sewing with it, or going back to the birthing the bag, it's not as stiff when you're having to birth the bag. And so when you're looking at cork, you really want something that's pliable, nice to work with, usually backed with fabric. And cork can come in all different kinds of colors. Dye it, they'll print it. Then you also have the natural cork, which is the cork that we usually see, in things like I'm familiar with, like corks in wine bottles, etc.
Yeah. Those are always nice too. I would say I'm kind of new to using cork, and I think a great place to start introducing cork is with smaller projects like wallets, because it's also pretty easy to use with a domestic machine. If you want stability but don't want to dive into the thicker vinyls and faux leathers, then introducing cork into a project. And I also love it when people mix and match. So they'll take like cork and have that be the base of like their tote, but then they'll have a different material up top. And mixing and matching cork can give a stability to the bottom of the bag, and then still have some other variables that you bring in up at the top of the bag, or even for handles. Cork's great for handles. Now, when it comes to vinyl, faux leather, I also include jellies and clear vinyl, and I like to call those out specifically because they do act differently than faux leather and other types of vinyls, but they do add a very fun but professional finish. Some of the bags that I've made using luxe vinyls that are really thick, those bags look like I bought them from a designer store. Not because I sewed them up well, but the finished look doesn't look like something that I could just whip up at home. It's got bag feet, there's special hardware, there's all these amazing things, the stitching, the quilting, like all these things that I've done to these bags, and it's just like, I made that. And I get really proud of that. Now, they're very involved and they take a long time. And when you start introducing those types of materials, it's really fun. Now, jellies and clear vinyls, those are great. I actually have some behind me to make little zipper pouches for different materials that I want to store in them. This one's actually going to be a makeup bag, and this one's going to be for my edge paints. These little clear ones are fun because you can see through them. They can wipe clean. The jellies are fun because they are solid, that match and have like a slightly different texture. The challenge with these can be that especially the clear ones will be sticky, in the sense of they want to stick to the plate of your machine or to your presser foot. So incorporating either a Teflon foot or what we typically call a non-stick foot is super helpful. So if you ever struggle with sewing these types of materials, there's a lot of great tips out there. Using that type of foot can really come in handy. I would say the other thing to keep in mind if you start investing in vinyls and faux leathers and heavier materials, having the right machine makes all the difference in the world. I have a Sailrite industrial machine that's portable, smaller, that I love. It sews right through it like butter. And so sometimes if you're really serious about bag making, you need to make sure that not only are you reading through the pattern, getting the right materials, getting the right hardware, but also have the right tool at home to even be able to make it. You don't have to spend a lot of money on one if you want to just test the waters, and then you may end up investing in a different one later like I did. I feel like a machine, when it comes to bag making, there's so many opinions on different types of machines, domestic, semi-industrial, and industrial. And I think you need to decide, how far do I want to go with my bag making journey and the materials I really want to work with, and what do I need from that? Work your way back to what do I need to be able to do that, and then do some research. But I just wanted to mention that on the topic of vinyls and faux leathers, because they can get thick.
They can get thick. I still use my FOF domestic machine at home. I have not upgraded yet to a semi-industrial. I ponder with the thought every now and then, but I'm really happy with my machine. My machine's 7 years old. I still toy with it every now and then, but for the most part, I can do everything that I want to do when it comes to faux leathers and vinyls. I wanted to touch on the clear vinyls as well. Yeah. If you don't have a Teflon foot or nonstick foot, you can also use tissue paper. So tissue paper on the top and bottom of your vinyl, that'll help keep it from sticking. And I love faux leathers. I sew with faux leathers all the time. They're my absolute favorite. When it comes to faux leathers, I will always sew with a denim needle, just to have a little bit more strength in getting through those thicker spots. When I'm sewing cork, I'll either do a microtex or also a denim needle, just to have a little bit more strength in what I'm doing, a little bit more accuracy in what I'm doing. But those are just some of the tips that I use. Having a domestic machine is just a heavier needle and just some of those little other workarounds. There might come a time that I upgrade to a semi-industrial.
Yeah.
I've pondered with it.
Now, waxed canvas. How do you use waxed canvas, Audra?
Full disclosure, I am not the biggest fan of sewing with true waxed canvas. I find it slightly messy and it just kind of gunks up my machine. Again, like we said, I don't have an industrial sewing machine. So waxed canvas is usually not my preferred go-to. But it is a great, great material when you've got a heavier duty machine to make some of those more durable bags, more outdoor bags, bags that will have more wear and tear. Little plug, we at Sally Tomato actually have a faux waxed canvas that has all the properties of waxed canvas, water repellent, it has the distressing, it has that same coating, but it actually doesn't have a true wax coating. So it doesn't have any of that stuff that'll gunk up your machine. It really sews just like a straight up canvas.
Quilting cotton would definitely be another one that I would say is the gateway from into bag making for a lot of people. It was for me as well. It's material that I already had on hand. I didn't have to invest in any special materials. It's a domestic friendly projects. I would say my mom's a prime example of this. She's done a lot of quilting and then she got into like making diaper bags that were quilted. And so she's done a lot of different quilted bags too. She would not consider herself a bag maker, but she has dabbled and she's made some beautiful things. If you have a skill set in a certain area of sewing, how can you take that and incorporate it into learning something new? So I always kind of like to mention that. Now, some miscellaneous types of materials that we've sewn with and turned into bags would be things like denim. Corduroy is making a comeback. Upholstery materials for like heavier canvases. Rope. I make rope bowls, and I actually have one over here that I'm working on, but I've watched people take rope and turn it into bags and some really cool art. Plastic placemats. I did a project a couple years ago where I took like a $2 placemat from Hobby Lobby, folded it in half, put a lining in it and a zipper, and my now lemon placemat is a lemon clutch. It looks like a lemon wedge. It's the cutest thing. Waterproof canvas, great for inside of bags, backpacks, ripstop nylon, and mesh. Great for the stretchy pockets for like the water bottles and things. So I think there's a lot of different materials you can use. We just touched on some of the more common ones for true bag making based on the patterns that we see and use.
And when it comes to quilting cottons, something I'm very passionate about is taking all your leftover quilt scraps and turning them into a bag. So you've made this beautiful quilt top and you've got all this leftover fabric, or say you make a quilt top and you don't love it as much as you thought you would. That's a great opportunity to turn it in, give it new life in another project in another way. The other thing I love is denim. My whole family knows if they're done with their jeans or their shorts to put them in my sewing room. And I've made bags out of multiple different pairs of shorts and quilted it all together. I'll make sure to post it in the Facebook group.
So Stitch and Share, that's our segment this week. And we want to talk about what we're both currently working on and fun things that we have going on. So for me, I just put that I'm quilting, and more quilting. I'm actually going to a sewing retreat here local. I signed up for it literally 2 days before the retreat started. And so I just pulled from my stash. We've got 4 quilting projects we're going to work through. I'm kind of going because I wanted to treat myself. I feel like I need it. And then secondly, I wanted to scope this place out for possible future retreat. That is what I'm currently working on, is a lot of quilting. And what I hope to get from that is to be able to take those quilted projects, bring them home, and then practice doing the actual quilting on my embroidery machine. I don't love free motion quilting as much on a domestic machine. I think I want to tackle learning and mastering quilting with my embroidery machine. What are you working on right now?
I'm working on a summer halter jumpsuit. I was originally going to make it for our trip and then decided not to stress myself out about it. So I'm going to make a fun summer halter jumpsuit, which I am 99% sure will be stolen by my preteen daughter. But I'm still going to make it because I'm excited about it.
Just go ahead and make 2 and then make a 3rd one for me. I'll send you my measurements.
Okay. All right. I'll get right on it.
Now, our You Love to See It is our way that we like to wrap up every podcast and just end the note on a positive. My You Love to See It is my son got his first job. You know, he was looking for a summer job. If you follow me on Instagram, you probably saw it in my stories. So he is going to be working at our local Chick-fil-A. They made a spot for him with the hopes that he'll be able to transfer that position into the Chick-fil-A close to college where he goes to school when school starts back up, because the owners know each other of those 2 Chick-fil-A's really well. We're excited for him to get his first job. I was telling, my fiance the other day, everybody talks about what their first job was. You get asked that so many times in your life. Where was your first job? Or every time you go to the mall, you're like, that's where I used to work, my first job, when I was 16 years old or whatever. And so I'm just excited that his first job is going to be with Chick-fil-A, and he's really excited about it. That's my you love to see it. What is yours, Audra?
My love to see it. I have to give a shout out to my husband because he is the one who edits all of our episodes. So
Dave is the real MVP of this podcast, y'all. If you didn't know, now you know.
He makes us sound so good. If you guys only knew how all the things. But I just want to give a shout out. This is episode 17, and I'm finally getting around to thanking my wonderful husband for all of his support and time in editing our podcast and making us sound really, really good. At least I think we sound good. I hope we sound good. That sounds kind of arrogant. I don't want to assume we sound good, but he makes us sound better than we do when we shoot. Let me put it that way.
You have to do it remote. It's hard to get equal audio. He has the skill set that just fell into place, and he kind of jumped in and took it on without hesitation. And now that he's retired and he's actually like when are y'all gonna do something else, record more, I want to do more, and at first I was like, is he gonna even want to listen to us yak all day about sewing? And he's like, I'm learning so much. He is the sweetest, and he's been so supportive, and you have to love to see that.
Yeah, I am very, very appreciative.
Thank you, Dave.
I am beyond lucky.
Go say thank you, Dave, in our Facebook group, The Sewcial Sewers. Go leave a comment for Dave and give him a shout out over on our YouTube channel when you watch this episode. If you are not following us on social media, please go do so. We have a lot more coming for you. Our next episode is actually another guest episode, and it ties right into what we just talked about today, and that is with Saya Swag Bags with Kasaya and her sister Susan. I love these two so much. They are a fun duo, and we're going to have a blast with them next week, so we'll see you then. Thanks so much, and happy sewing.
Bye, everybody.